Woo. Trying to find my way, 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 trying to find my way. I'm trying, change me.
My faith is in God alone, beyond a reasonable doubt. This brainstorm, pouring rain on your season of drought. Just trying to lay a couple seeds in the mouth. Thanks for listening. You ever get the feeling you was missing it?
What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, Scott Lane, the Black Bruce Wayne, a.k.a. the real Adam Coleman. So, you riding with Tru-ID. And, yeah, man, if you've been keeping up over the last month or so, I guess we'll be kicking off what's turned into somewhat of a mini-series. I should have named it On the Road Again, like 1, 2, and 3 or something like that. But for anybody who's been listening, you know, I was out of town quite a bit in February. Had an unusual number of speaking engagements, which is just pretty dope, man. I mean, just kind of humbling, really. You know, for anybody who's been following the show since day one, you think back to that first episode that I dropped with Tru-ID, and I talked about how this podcast, you know, it's really like an extension of my story, my journey. I think back to, you know, a couple of years ago, I was sitting at my job and, you know, asking myself some hard questions, you know, about is Christianity the white man's religion, and Horus, and, you know, Jesus' supposed connection, and there's all kind of things, man. You know, Hebrew Israelite stuff. You know, I was kind of just really digging into a lot of things and trying to, you know, figure out, you know, what the truth is, man. Had a lot of questions and wrestling with a lot of things. And as a result of really digging in, you know, and doing some study and finding out where the evidence points, I found myself, you know, coming full circle and affirming Christianity wholeheartedly, man, you know, because it's true. It's simple and plain. And the evidence is overwhelmingly pointing in that direction. So, you know, with that being said, man, you know, out of that was birthed, you know, the Tru-ID podcast, you know, and writing blogs and all that sort of a thing. You know, it's all kind of a different chapter, and it's just been pretty exciting because, you know, piggybacking on that, you know, I've had the opportunity, you know, fairly recently to, you know, just basically spread the message, man. You know, take what God has poured into me and share it with other people, encourage them also, man. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, you know, what February ended up being all about. So, you know, going back to the beginning of the month, you know, I shared with you guys the audio from Bloomington, Illinois. I was at the a conference up there with Pastor Tim Allison, and, you know, definitely a powerful experience. We had a great time up there. And so I shared the audio with that. And then also we followed up with that a couple of weeks later. I was in Georgia, Cartersville, Georgia. Shout out to Pastor Isaiah Robinson. You know, I got a chance to teach a couple sessions there at the True Summit. So I shared a portion of the second session from that. And I appreciate you guys riding with me on this stuff, man. Getting some good feedback on these episodes. So, and then, you know, so I finished out actually back at the No Ceilings Bible study, man. You guys have heard me mention the No Ceilings crew before in Richmond, Virginia. I go out there once a month, you know, to teach a class on apologetics. And so I ended out, you know, February there, and we got a chance to record the audio. Dealing with a subject that's a little bit different from, I think, most of what we've covered here on the show, the Tru-ID. Believe it or not, you know, I do actually talk about more things than Black history. You know, not that there's anything wrong with, sticking in a lane, but I'm kind of like I'm from the, you know, the 80s and 90s, man, the hip hop era. You know, as the MC back in the day, it was all about versatility. You had to be versatile. You know, you couldn't just rap the same way on every track. You know, you had to be able to switch your styles up. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of carry that into, you know, what I do with apologetics. You know, I try to, you know, study up on a number of different things. I mean, you can't necessarily be a jack of all trades, but, you know, I'm really interested in philosophy, man. I mean, I do talk a lot about, of course, ancient African Christianity, and of course Christianity during the slave era. I talk a lot about those things, but philosophy is actually where my passion really is, man. That's kind of where I started out in terms of apologetics, and so I got a chance to speak on that, or kind of display that side at the most recent No Ceilings Bible study that I did. And so I was asked to address the question of, why do bad things happen to good people? That's a deep question, man. You know, it's one of those things that just really kind of really hits you to the heart. You know, I think everybody kind of feels that question. You know, and any worldview, you know, that is making a claim to be true and to really represent the reality as it is has to grapple with that question. You know, why do bad things happen to good people? And not to get a little bit ahead of myself, but yeah, you actually kind of hear me talk about it. It's actually family of questions, I guess you could say, when it comes to what philosophers call the problem of evil, you know, and it gets phrased different ways. You know, why do bad things happen to good people? You know, why is there so much evil in the world? I think I mentioned it during the session where in the conscious community, you hear it is, you know, why did black people have to endure slavery, or why are we undergoing oppression now? You might think about, you know, for some of my conscious community people out there, Brother Polite, you know, will often pose these sorts of questions that fall under the category of the problem of evil. And so, you know, when you're dealing with people in the conscious community, Hebrew Israelites or whomever, just in terms of defending the faith, you know, defending the biblical worldview, you want to have answers to the types of questions that fall under the category of the problem of evil. You know, so when somebody says, well, man, you know, if Jesus is real, then why were the slaves getting beat up and, you know, or something like that? You know, if Jesus is real, then why did our people have to endure slavery? You know, or where was Jesus during slavery? You know, that might be a way that people might put it. You know, you want to have an answer to that kind of a thing. You want to be able to engage that question. And so I'm going to give you this audio right here. You know, this is from the most recent No Ceilings Bible study, where we engage that kind of a question, and just kind of listen out for a couple things. First of all, listen out for, you know, little nuggets here and there that I always try to contextualize broader apologetics topics into the sorts of things that we talk about here in the show. And then also too, man, one thing I love about apologetics, you know, this is just kind of a little nugget here, is that when you're doing it right, then these arguments for God's existence are don't just prove that God exists, or don't just give evidence rather that God exists, but it also gives you glimpses into what God is like, you know, the attributes of God. That's a cool thing about it. You know, when I was in Cartersville, Georgia at the Truth Summit, man, I was part of a Q&A session right there at the end of the summit, and it was pretty dope. And somebody asked a question. I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but I ended up talking about, you know, my background coming from the Word of Faith movement. You know, a lot of people, maybe they don't know that term, but, you know, it's kind of preachers like, you know, Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar, you know, those kind of, you know, preachers where it's all, you know, faith kind of a thing. And, you know, that's the kind of church that I came up in. And in those kinds of settings, you know, what you end up doing is coming away with an impression of God or just the Christian walk as if everything depends upon your faith performance, so to speak. You know, as in if your faith is strong enough, then you won't hardly have any problems in life. If your faith is weak, then things are going to be going haywire. You know, it's that kind of a thing. So ultimately, if stuff is going bad in your life, it's pretty much your fault. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't have enough faith is what it comes down to. And, you know, that perspective of our relationship with God is so heinous and unlike anything that the scripture talks about that is difficult to walk with God in a healthy way if you have that sort of mentality, if that's your impression of what God is like. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, an unexpected result of getting into apologetics is that as I was studying these arguments for God's existence, I was becoming more acquainted with the attributes of God that these different arguments point to, right? And as a result, I felt like, I believe that I've gotten a more clearer view. I've gotten a clearer view of what God is like. And so, you know, now when I approach difficult situations in my life, you know, and things may not, you know, just always be going my way, I don't feel like a faith failure, you know, so to speak. I understand that God is moral goodness. He is goodness itself. In the same way that I am Adam Coleman, God is good. He's goodness. You know, he is the standard of moral perfection. I understand that, you know, God is love, you know, in a very real way. I understand that God is sovereign. You know, he's above all things. And so when you really begin to, well, I guess I'll put it this way. When you're doing apologetics right, it should bring you into closer acquaintance with what God is like and what his attributes are, so that you can then, have a relationship with God that's untainted by some of these false perceptions that we pick up through bad doctrine and bad teaching, such as like the word of faith doctrine that I referred to earlier. So just kind of be on the lookout for that, as you're listening to, this segment here, me teaching at No Ceilings and just talking about, God as a moral standard. Just kind of think about it. Like, what are the implications of that? If God really is goodness, if he truly is moral perfection, right? Then how does that translate into how we perceive the world around us and the things that we're going through and how we interact with him as we're facing life challenges? Just something to think about there. Cool. Yeah. So anyway, just check it out.
So, the first time I came, we talked about, the Trinity, right? Is God a Trinity? Why do we believe that? So on and so forth, right? And then we've covered like a number of other topics. Like,
can you move that chair, Bruce? Chair? No, I'm telling you to move that chair.
Oh, okay, yeah. I can barely see my own nose. All right, so even if I kind of over lean. But, does Jesus exist? Did Jesus exist? Did the resurrection really happen? Is Christianity the white man's religion? So, if you recall, as we're kind of tackling those different questions, you primarily dealt with it from like a historical standpoint, with the exception of the Trinity question. We dealt with Scripture. We got into it. The Scripture said such and such. This is why we believe Christianity is the Trinity, and so forth. Right? With these other questions, they're history-based questions. Right? Did Jesus exist or not? It's kind of did he or didn't? Did the resurrection happen or not? What happened in the past? So in order to answer those kind of questions, we dealt with, we went to ancient sources like, Tacitus. Actually, that reminds me, I should have handed this out first. I actually have notes for y'all, which kind of, I think helped a little bit.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm a visual learner.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those things, I'm trying to incorporate more visuals as I teach, because I'm the same way. And I think that it helps, me, it helps other people. So, as we tackle, say, for example, did Jesus exist? We talked about like Tacitus. We talked about we went to those ancient sources that mention Christ, outside the Bible, and even talked about some of the biblical texts, and pulled those as kind of our evidence toward answering the question, did Jesus exist? Same thing with, the resurrection. Anybody can kind of go back and check out that video, I think, where we dealt with the minimal facts argument. We talked about those 5 facts. Same thing with, is Christianity the white man's religion? We talked about, we went through about 2,000 years of, ancient African Christianity on up to, even the present. We talked about, Christianity, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, all those kind of things. So, persons, places, and things. So that's kind of what we deal with to answer those kind of questions. However, to kind of put it in perspective, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? That's a different type of question.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can't point to a date and say, well, such and such, answer the question. You see what I'm saying? It's just a different animal. Yeah. And so any, branch of study that you get into, whether it's history, mathematics, science, and in this case, philosophy, there's going to be different types of evidences that you're going to need to answer different types of questions, right? Now, unfortunately, I think what happens is many times as Christians, as we're defending the faith, we get really good at, say, this type of information. So let's say it's tools in our toolbox, let's put it that way. We're okay with theology, we're okay with history. Philosophy is like, it's a little fuzzy. Like, what's going on with it? I think it's because it's just unfamiliar. When you think about, coming up in school, nobody takes a philosophy course, like 3rd grade. Nobody does it, right? You get history, math, kind of your standards, whatever. Nobody takes philosophy unless maybe you get to college or something like that. You take an elective, right? So it's unfamiliar. And so I think that's the reason why people tend to kind of shy away from it, or it's just it's kind of hard to get a grasp of. So that's what I was saying earlier. We don't want to necessarily just jump into the question of, why do bad things happen to people? Then we want to kind of put some tools in place, kind of get a handle on some of these things that we're going to need to answer the bigger question, right? And then along the way, like I said, I think we'll come across some things that will be helpful to us here and now. Is it making sense so far?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so excuse like the mangled board here. It's like my kids got to it. So it is what it is.
Let me kids.
Yeah, always. It actually is. So
Right.
All right. So why do bad things happen to good people? I call it a shape-shifting question, right? Because really it comes in a lot of different forms, okay? So, why do bad things happen to people? Where was God when such and such happened, right? 9/11, maybe said child was raped, something like that. Recently, I don't know, well, everybody probably doesn't know, I do a show called King Talks Podcast, right? So I'm running 2 podcasts right now, the Tru-ID podcast and the King Talks Podcast. So recently, I said a couple months ago, I interviewed David Banner, the rapper David Banner. So, I ain't gonna lie,
That's dope.
That's pretty dope, I wouldn't necessarily, anyway. So I kind of knew what he was about, but it was like, that's what's up, So anyway, we're talking about Christianity. Actually, we're talking about his music. He just out of left field starts, going, hey baby, this Christianity. And one of the things that he brought up was basically like, where was God when my grandma died? Or something. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same type of issue, just a different form. You know what I'm saying? So, if God is so powerful, why does he do X, Y, and Z? Or maybe a closer to home example, like you guys know, I always try to contextualize apologetics in terms of what we're dealing with, like the urban community. So, where was Jesus during slavery? That's like your brother Black question.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where was Jesus? Where is he at during slavery? Or why doesn't God free us from our oppressors? It's all forms of the same umbrella issue, and philosophers call it the problem of Eve. That's like the umbrella name for all these different types of questions and objections. Okay. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to try to pull some building blocks here. Make sure I stay on my notes, because I can talk, but I want to make sure I stay kind of on task here. But, so like what we want to do, we want to pull from different resources we have, which is going to include scripture. One thing I forgot to put up here is, now y'all know my handwriting is terrible. I can't draw. But, I don't know if y'all can see that there. Let's just say these are 2 streets right here. Terrible. But anyway. Like this intersection, if this street is, the one street is philosophy and one is theology, what I'm suggesting is that there's an intersection where we're taking the Word of God as a framework and applying it to some of the, these type of philosophical questions. That's our goal. We want to be faithful to the Bible. We're not trying to put words in God's mouth. Yeah. We want to make sense of things. We're saying from a biblical world. All right? Move right along. I want to pause here and ask anybody have any questions. You can ask questions as we go. We're not trying to go to the end before we get the questions. But if there's anything that's unclear, yeah.
About the David Banner on the backtrack, about the David Banner, what did you actually say to him when you said that about the family? I know a lot of listening to like this kind of like philosophy of like inside the film. Yeah. I was wondering about what was insane.
So y'all hear the question? Or?
Yeah. I was asking about what did he say to David Banner. David Banner was like, well, what would God let my grandma die? So I just want to know what he said. Right.
Well, that actually leads to my next point. So
perfect
segue. Okay, so when people ask, I might straighten that professor right now. Crazy. That's all right. So when people ask the question, this is so important. When people ask questions like, why did bad things happen to me? Or why didn't God step in when I had cancer or something like that, right? What can happen is we can start giving the wrong answer to the right question, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, what I mean by this, let's break it down a little bit. So when it comes to the problem, you're kind of dealing with like 2 halves of the same coin. One is emotion-based, and then the other one we're just going to call reason, or we can say information or something like that. Now, as an analogy, let's use like use medication as an analogy, right? So right at the beginning of January, I had to get a root canal. My tooth was like killing me. You know what I'm saying? Throbbing or whatever. I was being a knucklehead. I wasn't going to the dentist like I need to, and so it kind of reaped yourself. I had to go to the dentist. Now, when I went to the dentist, he said, you got to give me 2 prescriptions, before we can, deal with the tooth, right? Number 1, we got to give you some antibiotics, right, to kill all the bacteria and all that kind of stuff. I know it's kind of gross, but anyway, we can kill all the bacteria. And then 2, I'm gonna give you some Tylenol or I think Motrin, that I had for the headache. So we got one problem, and then there's 2 different medications. You know what I'm saying? Right. Now, it's kind of like that with the problem with evil. If I had taken the Motrin to address the headache, then my headache would have been gone. But they still would not have been able to proceed, with the dental surgery because I would not have taken the other medication, which would have taken care of bacteria. You know what I'm saying? You need two different, it's one problem, but there are two different types of medication needed. See what I'm saying? Now, in the same kind of way, if somebody comes to you with one of these types of questions, they might not need the reason answer right then and there. They might need the emotion-based answer, you know what I'm saying, or response, I should say. There's different types of medications that are going to be needed for different times. So to your question, with David Banner, I didn't get a chance to go into it with him, but he said, man, where was God? When where was Jesus rather when my grandma died of cancer, or something like that. He said it wouldn't have been the right time for me to get into all the philosophical workings. Well, brother, actually, when you think about it, evil is evidence for God. I mean, I could have gone there. I could have given him some really logical answer. But that really wouldn't have solved the problem. You see what I'm saying? I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, but we're going to get into that later months. I think, just kind of throw this in there, I think part of that is because when you're dealing with evil and suffering, there's always a personal element to it. You know, and I would say even there's, I'm hesitant to say always, but often, if not always, there's an element in terms of our relationship with God. You know what I'm saying? There's something there that's kind of housed in this issue of suffering, right? And so because there's this personal element, information is not always going to do the truth. It's not always going to do the trick. You see what I'm saying? Now, for example, I put a note to myself. Does anybody have a Bible? Anybody? Yeah, Bible study, man. Anybody got Bible?
You already got one on their phone.
Yeah, I know, right.
I thought you brought it with all the stuff you brought.
I know, right?
Bibles included.
Can somebody get to Revelation 21, verse 1 through 4? They can read that.
Is it not a reversion?
No, not really. No.
Okay. I'm reading
No, it's not like Quran.
So 1 through 4?
Was that?
1 through 4?
Yeah, chapter 21, let's go 1 through 4.
Okay. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away.
Right. So now think about, it's talking about the end of days, right? We're at the end of the book. You know what I'm saying? Jesus come back and establish his kingdom, so on and so forth. Now, how is God addressing obviously the emotional turmoil, the sorrow and all this kind of stuff that we've gone through, kind of this inner period between Genesis and Revelation? He addresses it with himself. You know what I'm saying? It says the tabernacle of God is with men. It's talking about relationship there. You know what I'm saying? It says he will wipe away every tear from their eye. Right? So when you think about how does God deal with the problem of evil, it's not purely information. It doesn't say he sits everybody down and explains all the inner workings of why this happened and why that happened. Now he might do that. But in that particular verse it says he's going to come and wipe every tear from them. You know what I'm saying? And when you look at this scripture from beginning to end, think about the book of Job. You know what I'm saying? Think about the book of Job. It's just so funny, man. Like, a preacher is going through in their personal life when they start preaching from Job. Job, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes. You don't see those books any other time.
All personal.
You know what I'm saying? Unless they just try to be like super faithful to the word, or they're going through something like that, man. This is what I'm saying. But there's no reason for me to say it. But anyway, when you look at the book of Job, at the end of Job, Job has all of these questions, all this kind of stuff. And what happens at the end? God comes himself. Yeah. And intervenes. You know what I'm saying? That's how God does. I'm saying when it comes to the problem of evil, he's not distant. He doesn't just throw facts at you. Right. You know what I'm saying? There's a personal resolution to the problem of evil. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I have to say that's the difference between this kind of starchy philosophy, you know what I'm saying, just kind of cold and distant, just answering questions, versus Christian apologetics. We're not just giving people information, a proposition. We're giving people a person. Yeah. I'm saying we're offering a person. Christianity is not just a set of ideas. that's supposed to make you feel better. Right. He said, no, what we're trying to do is give you information to point you to a person that actually himself is the resolution of the issue. You know what I'm saying? So when we're talking about the problem of evil and suffering, you don't have a total or complete solution to the problem until you have Jesus, saying, and all the fullness of what God brings to himself. You know what I'm saying? That makes sense. Yo, what we said?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, sir. Because I was just thinking about it. And you said that, because people want to argue, from their, the human logic or whatever. It's helpful to know that the history of Jesus or historical facts. I remember you said something about atheists, including the fact that they believe that Jesus actually existed. They may not believe in God, but
it's not
to that historical fact. I just wanted to say that.
Right. Well, it's been in my notes, man.
No,
it just came wrong. I had to go ahead. Because my point was about to be in terms of like, no, it's good, man. In terms of the role, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, there's this personal element that addresses the emotional part. And so what we want to do with reason is kind of like a safety net, in a sense, that kind of keeps us from, falling us so far and keeps us in position so that God can minister to us on a personal level. So that's kind of how I'm treating, you know what I'm saying, the problem. So that's why we're going to go through and put together some of the building blocks so we can answer the problem, right? So, like you said earlier, I like the way you put it. There's really no one-size-fits-all answer to the problem of evil. Because to some extent, there's always a personal element to the problem of evil. And I can't give you information that's going to answer your particular issue. And we're just wired that way. When you think about children, you know what I'm saying, when a child is crying or something like that, and the mom comes and comforts them, there's chemicals that are released in the brain that cause that child to quiet down, even if they're in physical pain. I'm saying it's almost like a medicine in this. That's kind of how God, when we're really struggling with pain, it's actually being in His presence. It's actually spending time in His Word. It's not just something we do just for the fun of it. That's actually the solution. So with that being said, so here's what we're going to do. Like I said, each and every time we meet, kind of over the next 3 months, I still want to give you something to kind of come away with, such that you can take it and say, if you're faced with this question tomorrow, you can at least have something to come back with. Okay? Yeah. Now, what I personally think is the most important point, and this really is my opinion, but as we're kind of addressing this, you want to take pressure off yourself in answering this question.
It's true.
Right? Now, either you're asking these questions of yourself and trying to figure it out, or maybe somebody's throwing it at you.
That's a high pressure question.
One way or the other. You know what I'm saying? You're going to be facing. So you want to take the pressure off. So, and how do we do that? Number one, if you're dealing with objections from somebody else, let's say, for example, I mentioned Brother Polito. Everybody may not know who he is, but he's basically a guy that he's Pan-Africanist. Basically, Christianity is a white man's religion. He's always been against Christianity, right? And so one of the things that he'll bring up is, where was Jesus during slavery? That might be something that he might say. And you might be on the internet. You might be scrolling through and see a meme or something like that. To that effect. How do you respond? Well, first of all, when you're dealing with the problem of evil, it's not just a question that Christians have to answer. We're not the only ones who have to answer that question. I don't care what worldview you hold to, right? Everybody's got to have an answer for the problem of evil, right? So, for example, if I'm dealing with Hebrew Israelites, they say, well, where was Jesus during, translated slave trade? Well, where was your concept of God during translated slave trade? You know what I'm saying? Like, we can have a conversation. You know what I'm saying? Where was Horus during the translated slave trade? You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever, somebody wants to come from, or let's say if, maybe even if the person is an atheist, right? Where was Jesus during the translated slave trade? Okay, well, I hear you, but I'm going to give you my answer, and what I want to hear from your perspective. How do you account for the problem from an atheist perspective? You see what I'm saying? You don't want to take the ball and just put it in the court. Right. You want to share the burden, so to speak, and have a conversation. The reason why you don't want to do it is because if you just take it on yourself, say if somebody's making an objection, then I don't care how good of an answer you give, they can always just be like, well, nuh-uh. You know what I'm saying? Because you didn't convince me, all of a sudden now Christianity is false. You see what I'm saying? That's just not the way it works. So I kind of listed up here some of the broad, worldview, I guess you could say frameworks, whether it be atheism, theism, I'm talking about monotheism, such as, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, monotheism right here. Polytheism is where people believe in a whole bunch of different gods, say like some versions of Hinduism, pantheism, and panentheism, Now, like these are kind of like your broad isms that most religions are going to fall under. Say, well, if not all, I think. And so my whole point is, I don't care what category they fall under, they're going to have to answer the question just like you, right? And so again, that takes a little bit of pressure off of us. You know, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it, right? Now, with that being said, number two, just because somebody doesn't agree with me as to what my answer is for the proper people doesn't mean that I'm wrong, right?
Yeah.
If I don't, just because I haven't convinced you, you know what I'm saying, it's like dead to rights,
Yeah, that's good.
you know what I'm saying, that my way is correct, doesn't mean that I'm incorrect. See what I'm saying? Again, this is not like history. You know what I'm saying? So, for example, if somebody says that Jesus was created at the Council of Nicaea, that's something we see all the time, right? Well, I can go back to the manuscripts from Tertullian and his writings talking about Christ. I can go back to just actually the four Gospels and what they're dated to in the 2nd century or so. You know, I can point out these things. Okay, well, this fact, if I match it to your fact, obviously you're wrong. You see what I'm saying? But philosophy is not necessarily like that. I'm saying it's not so much about, okay, well, you know, I'm going to give you something where you just have no choice but to believe. There's a little bit of element of choice. There's an element of, you know, do I have what's called rational justification. Now, whoever was here when we talked about the 5 facts with the resurrection, they'll remember I kind of used that term, rational justification. In other words, do I have good reason to believe what I believe, or to take the stance that I'm taking on this or that particular issue? Now, if I do have good reason, if I have rational justification for my position, you know what I'm saying, then whether you agree with me or not doesn't mean that I'm wrong, because I still have rational justification. I think what we get caught up in is when we're talking to other folks, if I can't convince you, like, no, my way is right, like, I'm telling you the truth, then it's like we feel like we failed.
Right.
And that's simply not the case. Yeah, that's simply not the case. It just means that person disagrees, doesn't understand where we're coming from or where we're going to be, but it doesn't mean that we're wrong. And so what we have to do, we have to be comfortable in having rational justification of what it is that we hold to and standing on it. Regardless of what anybody else says, we know that that we have good grounds for what it is that we believe or take hold to. You have a question or what?
I have a comment.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I have roommates that some are like, I believe they're agnostic, but not really. They're admittedly angry with God, and so they refuse to. And so we've had plenty of conversations like this. And I've had to take one of my lessons was philosophy of religion, and so it was very tedious. But one thing I remember was that my roommate kept asking me for like, hey, so you're a Christian, you believe in God, you've done this, like, where's the proof? And I'm like, I can't give it proof. Like I can give you examples and I can show you what I believe in, and it's up to you at that point whether you want to take that and rationalize it for yourself or what you want to do with it. But I'm like, if like essentially what I learned is that I guess it was some metaphysical idea that nothing can be proven to exist, that nothing can be proven real or false. And so, therefore, how can I prove with certainty, like you put up there, certainty and like facts of that God exists? And I can't do that. No one can do that. So it takes, and that just goes with why faith is so important, because we have to believe, we have to have faith, and you know, it's our our lives are proof of it as well. But it's like when you're having a conversation, I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and like tell you all these things as facts and whatever, when some of it is faith-based, and you can't have proof of something.
Interesting. So, it's interesting you said that. So, I think that many times Christians are uncomfortable with philosophy because some of the jargon, the philosophical jargon, doesn't fit within the Christian framework. And here's what I mean by that. The issue of certainty. Now, when we're talking about just straight philosophy, the word certainty and proof, when you're dealing with philosophical debate, don't really come up. Then for that very reason. And the idea is, I don't want to get too far, but we're all fallible beings, and we can all be possibly wrong about this or that. And so when you're dealing with philosophical discourse, the issue is not whether I can prove to you with 100% certainty that A, B, and C is true. The question is, can I give you, again, rational justification? Do I have good reasons for what I'm saying? Either I do or I don't. But what happens is sometimes we paint ourselves in a corner. We're just kind of casually talking to stuff, and I use words like proof, certainty, or whatever. But if I'm dealing with somebody like in a debate setting, then I never use the term proof or certainty. What I will say is I can give you evidence as to why my position, as to why I can say that my position is true. You know what I'm saying? I'll give you evidences. It's a subtle distinction, but that's an important point. And I think actually the first part we said, if I understood it correctly, some of what we're going to get into will tie in as well to maybe help you in some of the discussions that you're having. Because while for the Christian worldview, there are plenty of evidences by which we can say we have rational justification that Christianity is true. So you might be able to share some of those evidences, with your roommates in such a way that maybe they come up with a different perspective. You look perplexed.
Nah,
you good or okay?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm just taking it all in.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I couldn't tell if that was the face of somebody. How like somebody said something, you scream it.
You like, right. Nah. Not at all.
I was making sure. Okay, so right. So what we want to say, what we're shooting for, right, in terms of our target, right, in answering the problem of evil, we want to present a case for which we have rational justification. That's our target, right? Now, one thing I like to tell people all the time is the truth, doesn't always make you feel good, and what makes you feel good isn't always true. You know what I'm saying? So, as we're pursuing, the answer to this question, it's not necessarily going to go home and feel, man, all bubbly inside about evil or something like that. It's like evil is not the kind of thing that you feel, good about. But again, like I said, we want to have rational, justification. So I'm not going to go through all three of these points right now. We'll probably come back to another night because I want to get to the main argument I want to get to, and then we can kind of deal with questions. Like I said, I want to make sure I leave you guys with something. You doing okay on time?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. So, as we're dealing with these types of philosophical questions, okay, in order for us to say we have rational justification, there's certain kind of guidelines that we want to stay within, okay, by which we say, yes, we have good reason to believe this or that. The first one might be that something is internally consistent, okay? Now, remember I was talking about, actually everybody might not have been here, but I was talking about worldviews a while back, right? And how basically a worldview is kind of like how it sounds. It's the lens through which you see the world, right? It's like the sum total of all your beliefs. You know what I'm saying? It kind of forms how you respond to things, what you think, and so on. So that's your worldview. It's like a big puzzle. I don't know if y'all can see this on camera, but these 4 squares are supposed to be a puzzle. It's like the worst puzzle like that. Oh, you can't see. Okay, that's cool. So these 4 squares are supposed to be a puzzle, right? And for any given worldview, the idea is that you want all the pieces of your worldview to fit together. Right? Now, one thing we talked about before, when dealing with the question of is Christianity the white man's religion, is that some people are coming to the conclusion that, based on whether it's slavery or whatever it may be, the Christianity puzzle piece doesn't fit with the African ethnicity puzzle piece.
Right.
And so within their worldview, because those don't fit, they cast Christianity aside, and so therefore they choose something else.
Yeah.
Whether the Hebrew Israelites, Kemetic, and so on and so forth. They're trying to find something that fits better with that Africanity, so to speak. Well, in the same way, when it comes to the issue of, does God exist? You know what I'm saying? Or what kind of God is he if he does exist? What happens is, when it comes to the issue of there being evil in the world, people get the sense like, well, dang, if there's all this evil, then how can it be that God is real or God is good, God is all powerful, so on and so forth? Something's not fitting there. Therefore, either God's got to go, either he doesn't exist, or I've got to do something else with this evil thing, and I don't know what to do with it, so I'm just going to kind of maybe shovel it on the rug a little bit, and it becomes kind of like a stone that you shoot. It just kind of bothers you, but you don't even deal with it. So what we want to do is we want to demonstrate how evil and God don't have to be both jettisoned out of your world. You have to push the eject button or either one of them. There's a way in which you can understand the world where all the pieces fit together, okay? And they don't contradict each other. So you want to do that in a way that's internally consistent. I mean, you're not contradicting yourself. You know what I'm saying? So if I say that, let's say, for example, if I believe that, God is the type of God where nothing bad ever happens at any point in time ever, right? But that's what I believe. But then I watch the evening news and I see all kind of bad, so I see, school shootings, so on and so forth. Well, the evidence of what's in reality is not driving with my concept of God. So either I'm not perceiving reality correctly, or my concept of God is incorrect. You see what I'm saying? Because I've got a contradiction. So if you hold a worldview which is that kind of contradiction, And that's a red flag that something's got to change in the worldview so that it fits reality
Right.
and it fits the way things are.
Right.
Good?
Yeah.
So that's kind of internal thinking. Also, it kind of goes with it, but fits reality. You know, we see the evidence of how we experience life, what's going on around you. You want to have a worldview that helps you to operate in the real world in such a way that, you don't look crazy. So, if I believe that I can fly, I can leave as hard as I want to. But if I jump off a 50-story building, I will find out real quick that reality doesn't support my belief. You see what I'm saying? Real fast, right? So you want to have beliefs that align with reality. And then thirdly, you want to have some, a worldview that helps you to make sense of your experiences, right? Now, again, going back, these three kind of guidelines, any worldview that's attempting to answer these questions is going to have to answer these questions, this particular question, to where it satisfies these social guidelines, saying not just the Christian. Yes?
I have a question. It might be a little off, but what happens when someone's reality, when it doesn't fit their reality, but it fits someone else's reality? I.e., if someone grew up in a different part of town versus someone else's. And so their concept of their worldview is based on their perception of what their reality is. And so therefore they create this construct in their head that fits their reality, but if you were to move them to some other place, that same reality doesn't fit. So how does that work with religion based upon, because like if, for examples,
Okay.
like say if in your reality you jump off a building, you can't fly. But in somebody else's, they can jump off a building and they can fly. Obviously not literally, but there's something that's possible in your realm of reality that's not possible in theirs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it depends on what we mean by reality. So for example, I said, so in the real world, wherever we go, the law of gravity exists,
right,
one
right.
way or the other. Let's
Right.
say on Earth.
Right.
Anywhere in the Earth, the law of gravity is relatively the same. Relatively the same. However, in America, I could start a church. Let's just put it this way, I could start a business, and there's a good possibility if I work hard at it that I will succeed in that business. In a communist country or a third world country, I could start a business and work really hard, but it could be that some some warlord comes through with machetes and all that kind of stuff. They just wreck shop, ruin my business, whatever, and I don't succeed. That's just a different context. You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to establish between like what is reality, in a universal sense, and then what is reality in a contextual sense. You see what I'm saying? Something could be true within my context, and yet not true in somebody else's context necessarily, And so I think what we're going to get at here is, that's a really good question. So I guess, to kind of frame where we're going, we're mostly going to be dealing with like kind of in a universal sense, those kind of truths that are true to just the human experience. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Cool. Good. Good to the final point. Does anybody else want to take a shot?
The universal sense is a good terminology. That's what everybody, as far as in the world, is, they speak of, the universe, put stuff out of the universe. I come back to, this whole concept of just like people just believe like the universe in itself is God.
Yeah. And that's kind of like along the lines of pantheism.
Mm-hmm.
More like that's kind of that. So, okay, so for today, the whole goal is, again, we want to take pressure off ourselves. The ways we talked about doing that so far, we had to recognize the different facets of the different aspects of this issue that we're tackling. Some is emotional, some is information. Then you don't want to give the wrong medication, for the wrong type of symptoms, right? So, this is somewhat off, but I remember a couple of years ago, me and my wife had a situation where, there was a death in the family, right? And, people come by and they feel like they have to say something.
Yeah.
And they feel like they've got to, give you a word of encouragement, but sometimes this is best not to say anything. So this guy comes to me, he's like, man, you know what, man? You're going to look back on this situation and you're going to realize
Already, right?
You're going to realize it's the best thing that ever happened.
What?
And so he's like right here in my face, right? So I'm like, And I'm telling you, it took all the Holy Ghost I got. You know what I'm saying? I had to cycle through like 20 different responses. You know what I'm saying? All of which involved cussing them out.
That's right.
To get to, you know what? I appreciate it, bro. And I just kind of like left it at that. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, sometimes, again, you want so bad to give people information where, you know, it may not be necessary. Sometimes a hug is good. To that. Or, you know, maybe it's good just to kind of just sit down and listen. You know what I'm saying? That could be as effective, if not more, you know, than trying to, you know, help somebody reason your way through something. You know, sometimes it's not necessary, right? Okay. Life and times are valid points. Cool. All right. So we're talking about taking the pressure off. You know, the problem with evil is everybody's question. It's not just Christian. We got to put the ball in other people's court, just like they put it in ours, and, you know, have them carry the word. We also talked about just because somebody else doesn't agree doesn't mean that we're wrong if we have, you know, rational justification for what we're affirming. Now we're going to move to our final point, at least for this evening. And I'm going to put forth an argument. There's different ways you can do it. There's different ways you can do it, but there's a simple way, I think, of a way in which evil, the existence of evil, is actually evidence that God does exist. I'm saying that may sound kind of strange, but just kind of follow the chain of reasoning, right?
Yeah.
So let's just follow the steps, all right? So if somebody raises a problem, they're assuming that evil exists, right? Or else they wouldn't be bringing it up. So you're starting with something that evil exists. Now, if evil exists, then that would suggest that there's a such thing as good, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right? Now, if there's a such thing as good and such thing as evil, right? Good and evil exists, then that would suggest that there must be a moral law by which we can differentiate between good and evil, right? So evil exists, good exists. So in order for us to tell the difference between the two, there must be a moral law that we're perceiving by which we can tell that there's a difference between the two. So, for example, if I say in example A, let's say you have a person, you know, who's taking care of a child, you know, feeding them, you know, providing all their needs, so on and so forth, right? And then you have this other person who takes an infant and for no reason just tortures them every day just for fun, right? Like, we can clearly see that there's a moral difference between the person who takes care of the child and the person who, you know, is torturing the child just for fun. You know, if you can't see that difference, talk to me afterwards, because there might be a problem with it. But obviously there's a moral difference between taking care of a child and torturing them for fun, right?
Yeah.
So again, you know, that's that moral law in place. If we perceive this moral law by which we can tell there's a difference between good and evil. Okay, so let's back up. So evil exists, which suggests there must be a good. If good and evil exist, now it suggests that there must be a moral law by which we can tell the difference between good and evil. Now, if there's a moral law, then that would suggest that there's a moral law given, right? There's a source of this moral law. All right, it's not just necessarily just floating around out in space, right? Now, if there's if the existence of the moral law suggests that there is a moral law giver, then I would argue that the best explanation for that moral law giver is God. All right. Now, that's just a basic line of reason. What we want to do is go back and kind of back up what we say. Now, most of the action, so to speak, is going to occur with these two right here. Okay. If somebody's going to challenge you, they're probably going to want to attack one of these 2 points, right? Because the first 3 are just kind of common sense. You see what I'm saying? Now, in order for us to, how are we doing on time? How much time we got?
We got time. No, 10 minutes.
Oh, cool. All right, cool. All right, so let's go over some terms right quick. Now, first of all, let's jump back up here for a second. You know, how many people would agree like this? You know, there's a real evil is real. Like, it's a real thing. You know what I'm saying? It's not something that just, I'm saying it's really in the world, right? So, when we're talking about morality, you can either be talking about objective morality, or subjective morality. Now, objective morality, I wish I put it up here. Objective morality, we're talking about right is right, wrong is wrong, no matter what anybody says. That's an example. That's kind of what you're talking about. We're talking about objective morality. Okay? Subjective morality is more so like, well, it's good for you, it's not good for me, you know what I'm saying? It's all relative. That's kind of subjective morality. So, for example, objective truth would be something, or objective morality would be kind of like 2 + 2 is 4. And that's, regardless of what you think about it, you know, if you say 2 + 2 is 5, I mean, you're wrong. You're saying like 2 + 2 is 4. It's subjective, right? It's outside the person, right? Subjective morality would be kind of like, and now it's kind of like, if I say to you, vanilla ice cream is better than chocolate ice cream.
Yeah.
Right? If I disagree with you, well, we can argue about it all day long, but I can't prove to you that vanilla ice cream is better than chocolate because it's a matter of preference. It's subjective. You know what I'm saying? So when we're talking about the problem of evil, first of all, if somebody's going to bring up this problem, they're not really talking about subjective. Because if it's just a matter of opinion, you can say, well, it's kind of none of the rest of it makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Generally, people are talking about it as objective evil, like real evil. You know, like this really bad stuff going on. And that's what they mean when they bring up this issue. So, now, with that being said, that would suggest then that objective morality exists. And there's a real thing of right and wrong that really exists. Now, how do you best explain that? Okay, well, let's think about it. Make another distinction real quick. You good? Okay, so we're talking about objective morality, we're talking about subjective morality. Now I want to talk about this word evil a little bit more. There's two different kinds of evil that philosophers are generally talking about when they're dealing with this question. We're talking about natural evil, and we might call personal or moral evil. Natural evil is stuff like hurricanes, earthquakes, bad cancer, things like that. Things that it's not a person is doing this or that. It's just bad stuff going on. That's natural evil, all right? Personal evil is, like somebody going out and murdering somebody or, doing something wrong. So those are like the types of evil that did, right? Now, when we deal with natural evil, what are we really saying, right? Let's break it down. Let's say a child gets cancer, and it passes away at age 10 or something. Now, you feel like there's something really wrong about it, right? It's not the way that things ought to be. That's kind of what makes it evil, right? It ought to be the case that child grows up, flourishes, does whatever it's going to do, but it's cut short. That's not the way that things ought to be. That's what strikes us as so problematic about a child dying of cancer. Yeah. Now, when we think about that word ought to, okay, if there's a way that things ought to be, then that means that there's an intention behind it, right?
Facts.
Right? There can't be an intention, though, unless you have a person to intend it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So if there's a way that things ought to be in this reality that we live in, right, then that means that there is an intention of how things ought to go in reality, right? But how can you have an intention, unless you have an intender? Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. So when we're talking about the moral law, or at least when we talk about natural evil, right? The very fact that people believe that things ought to be a certain way, requires then that there be a person behind it all to have that sort of intention. Right? Just kind of hold on to that for a second, right? That's the natural evil side. Now we're going to talk about personal evil, okay? There's things that people should do and things that people shouldn't do, right? If I walk in here and buy, some Krispy Kreme donuts, good. If I walk in here and steal Krispy Kreme donuts, bad. We understand it, right? Now, when you think about your own moral experience, saying you kind of get that gut check sometimes, like, I ought not to do this. You know what I'm saying? Or let's say that you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person getting beat up by some random folks. You feel like, I ought to call the police, right? There's something that you ought to do. See, now again, that ought to come up again. And in terms of the way that you ought to behave, in terms of that personal morality, there's an ought. Now, in a sense, there's this inner sense telling you something. There's a command. There's this inner sense telling you that you should do this or that.
Yeah.
Now, how can you have a command without a command? Right?
Right.
How do you have instructions on what ought to be, or what you ought to do, rather, without somebody giving the instructions? Right? Let me give you an example real quick to sum it up. Let's say that you're walking down the street, walking down the beach, right? You see a pile of sticks just kind of laying. You're probably not going to pay a whole lot of attention to it, right? Right. So you walk a little bit further, and you see a line of sticks that says, Anthony, come home right now. I've got grilled cheese sandwiches waiting for you. You know what I'm saying? You're going to determine, that first pile of sticks, you're not really going to think too much of it. Yeah. But in that second pile, you're going to say, you're not going to be like, hey, man, you know what? It's just amazing how the water gets washed up on this shore here. Or you get those sticks to give me this message. That's just crazy. You're not going to think that, right? Yeah. Because if there's a message, then there's probably a messenger. If there's something being told to you, that's being told to you by a person. Right. Makes sense, right? Yeah. So in the same way, when you get this sense that somebody's telling you, or that something's telling you that you should do this or you should do that, then a rational person would infer that where there's a message, there must be a messenger, right? So that's why we use this fourth step right here. The fourth and the fifth step. Whether we're dealing with natural evil or whether we're dealing with personal evil, in the world, either way, what we find is intentions. What we find is that internal message telling us the things of what we should do or should not do. Both of which require a person behind it all. There's a person behind reality itself who's able to inject these intentions into reality. That makes sense. So that's why, given the fact that there's a moral law, that suggests that there must be a moral lawgiver. And again, my best explanation for that is moral lawgiver is what we call God. People call it, you use different words if you want. You can just say the universal intender and universal of all, so you can do whatever. In the Christian conception, we just shorten it to G-O-D and say it's God, right? So again, if evil exists, then that would suggest that good exists. If good and evil exists, then that would suggest that there's a moral law by which we can differentiate between good and evil. If there's a moral law, then that would suggest that there's a moral lawgiver. It's got to come from somewhere. And based on the fact that when we think about our moral experience, how we interpret the world, we see that intention kind of hidden behind it. And we see the message, and we see the messenger in terms of what we ought to do. We can then rightly infer that the best explanation for that moral lawgiver is God, or this person behind it all. So, in that sense, if somebody acknowledges, that evil exists, then I would argue that evil is actually an evidence for God. So let's go back to Brother Polite for a second. He said, well, where was Jesus, during the transatlantic slave trade? Now, the underlying premise there for him is that slavery was wrong. It was something that we ought not to have endured.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Now, I would come back and say, well, that's interesting. I agree with you, slavery was jacked up. Where we might disagree is I don't think that's actually evidence against God. I think it actually supports the fact that God exists, because the very fact that you see it as evil, you recognize it's actual evil.
Yeah.
Saying, and I would just walk them through. If there's evil, then there's good. If there's good, there's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you can substitute anything in there. Let me just go this way. You can substitute anything in there, whether it be why the school shooting, 9/11, whatever it may be. If once somebody acknowledges that there's evil in the world,
you can walk them through.
Actually give me the first step to walk them through.
Major key.
You know what I'm saying? So again,
we'll start conversations on purpose.
I know.
You said what?
About to go start conversations on purpose.
Right. I mean,
in Corey's case, arguments.
It gives you a safe way to start out these conversations.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because what we're doing is, again, everybody's got to answer these questions. I'm saying it's not just the Christians. B, you want to have rational justification for why it is that we believe, that there is a God. You know what I'm saying? It is not, evil in the world is not evidence against God. And again, towards that rational justification, you can use this argument and say, actually, evil, once you acknowledge it, you've actually given me the first step to kind of walk you through and show how evil is evidence for God. You had a question?
Yeah, I got a question. Wouldn't that seem like it's a little bit like say something like a school shooting that happened, and somebody would say something like, where was God during the school shooting? And let's say they probably like agnostic or whatever, and you try to explain like the existence of God, like I'm not like that, but wouldn't that seem like kind of insensitive at the time for you to like bring up God like immediately? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's not so much about bringing up God, but to your point though, I would not take this. Let's say that somebody just is really emotional and the school shooting jacked up, or maybe they lost somebody. If they are obviously grappling on an emotional level with something like this, let's say the school shooting, let's just stay with that. Then I'm not gonna be like, hey man, you know what? You just acknowledge that evil exists, and if evil exists, I'm not gonna do that.
Take them to everything.
I'm gonna kind of size them up, and that's where conversational skills. Matter of fact, boom. I bring this up all the time, man. It's one of my top 3 books right here in Apologetics. The book Tactics by my man Greg Copeland, who also appeared as a guest on the Tru-ID podcast, which you can check out. Shameless plug. At TRUIDpodcast.com, available on iTunes. So Greg Copeland, he actually breaks down how to be conversational in your apologetics. Okay, yeah. Actually, while I'm at it, so I'm just throw this out too. You also have a book by a guy named Frank Turek. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Turek, Frank Turek. And he's got a book called Stealing from God. He's got a whole chapter on pretty much just what I just went over. That's good. And my man, William Lane Craig, he's got a book called On Guard. where he deals with the same types of things. And actually, some of the stuff that we'll get into next one, he addresses as well. But to your question though, again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how there's different medications for different aspects of this problem. I'm saying if somebody's really grappling emotionally, then I may not want to go into the regular. I might just want to sit down and just listen to the person, and then I might just want to ask, like, is this something that you want to have a conversation about? I can give you the biblical perspective as to how these things fit together. Is this something that you really want to talk about? If they say no, then it just might be the wrong time. You say, let me know when you want to talk about it, But then there might be other cases where, let's say that maybe somebody sees the issue on the news, sees the school shooting on the news. It may not necessarily be like emotionally torn up about it, but it's like, dang, man, that's messed up. And they may just have some real questions, right? Now, again, what I'm going to say is, hey, you can have a conversation about it. I'm not just going to blurt it out. So I'm just going to open the door. And if they're willing to have a conversation about it, then we can kind of work our way through it. And so, again, if they have a different worldview, then I would say, okay, well, you disagree with me. I'd be interested to hear your perspective. What do you think accounts for evil in the world? How's it fit? Now, so for example, just real quick. All right, so for example, talking about, actually, it could be either one. Yeah, let's talk about Hinduism, for example. Some forms of Hinduism, the way that they try to resolve the problem is to say that evil is just an illusion. As a matter of fact, everything's illusion. You're an illusion, I'm an illusion, evil is just an illusion, right? That's the way that they try to resolve the problem of evil. Now, then we can ask ourselves, does that really fit with reality? I'm saying, like, if you've ever lost a loved one, I'll be personal. For example, in January last year, I lost my dad. You know what I'm saying? And this is obviously the type of issue I had to really grapple with. You know what I'm saying? Like, my dad passed away, he was a vegan. He exercised every day. I mean, he was just a very healthy guy. He was in the Word, the whole nine. And like that, you know what I'm saying, he was gone, right? Now, if somebody comes to me and says that, you know what, Adam, you're not really experiencing pain here. It's just all an illusion. Right. It's like, my dad,
I feel this.
You know what I'm saying? My dad was not an illusion. The pain of loss that I feel from him not being here is not an illusion. So that solution doesn't fit with reality. I'm saying, also, when we're talking about between natural evil, I'll say I count that situation as natural evil, versus moral. I work in the mental health field. I know people and have worked with people who have had loved ones killed. I'm not sure if you have worked in mental health. I'm saying people have been killed, shot, whatever, in the inner city, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go to that person as counsel, but like, yeah, you believe that that person was killed and murdered, or whatever, shot and murdered. But it's really just an illusion. You're saying all the pain that you feel, the person didn't really exist, that whole thing. It doesn't align with reality. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So it doesn't give a good answer. See what I'm saying? Right. So, you know what I'm saying? So my whole point is, everybody's got to answer this question. I'm going to present the biblical world. And if they have problems with it, like I said, it's a back and forth. We can have a conversation. I want to hear their perspective. And to end it out with this, when we're talking about apologetics, just in general, okay? Apologetics is not just about answering questions. It's about helping people to think through their questions. You know what I'm saying? That's a big piece of it. And so if somebody's grappling with the problem of evil, and they may have an answer that doesn't quite work, so that's why they don't really have any peace over it, you know what I'm saying? Then my goal is, I want to come alongside you, and I want to help you think through this problem, help you think through these questions. See what I'm saying?
Word. Well, one time for my man Adam. Appreciate you as always. Any questions, comments, concerns? Adam's here for it.
Yeah. I got a question. So this has been something that I've been like wrestling with in my own faith for about the last 2 years, and this has just been in dealing with the issue of evil and things like that.
Pressure on, so like if I can't answer this question, it's like he's just walking out of the
No, it's not even that. No, it's not even that. I'm just
his faith is in your hands.
No, it's all in God's hands. I'm asking this question just to kind of get your thoughts on this, because it's something I've wrestled with for a while.
Sure.
When you see in God's word him saying, that which a man, God is not mocked, that which a man sows, so shall he also reap. But you look at maybe history or something like that, and there's all these times where I'll say a good example for me is America, right? The evils that America has done, it has not paid a fraction of that cost or anything like that. So if God judges nations, and we see that the Old Testament is replete with God's judgments of nations. How do we wrestle with, and we know that we've been on this continent for, like, Africans have been on this continent for 399 years, since 1619. I think that is right. Yeah, in Jamestown. How do we wrestle with all of that in the context of reaping what you sow, both on a personal level and on a national, like in group level? That's what I've been kind of trying to understand.
Makes sense. So I want to answer that in two ways. The first way is more of a side thought. It's partly my opinion or my perspective. And then the second one, I'm going to try to give something like more concrete, right? It's just something to think about. And some people disagree with me on this. I'm just kind of prefacing it that way, to give you my perspective. When you think about America, right? And let's just go back to the Civil War, right? The Civil War, more people died in that one war than all of the other conflicts that we've been in put together up until maybe about 5 or 7 years ago. You see what I'm saying? Now, what's interesting is this. I refer to anybody that's watching, and you can check it out yourself. There's a guy named David Walker, Reverend David Walker, black guy. And so back in, I want to say, 1820s, maybe 1830s, he was in North. He was in Boston, right? And he wrote what's called David Walker's Appeal. I think the full version of David Walker's Appeal to the colored peoples of the world. Things like that, right? Somebody wants to look it up. Now, David Walker's Appeal, he says something very interesting. He says that because of the sin of racism, it was very interesting. He said the sin of racism. He's talking about slavery, but he was very specific about that. Maybe we can get into that. It's why it's significant. He said because of the sin of racism, it's not going to be necessarily Africans rising up and defeating and throwing off oppressors. It's actually going to be them doing each other in. I put that in mind. Splitting and doing each other in. It's very interesting because he says this about 30 years before the Civil War. And it's almost kind of prophetic. Very interesting. Abraham Lincoln said something very similar. I'm saying maybe just before the Civil War popped off. Never ain't close to the events. But he talks about that as well. How this is like a national sin. And there was more awareness of the biblical worldview back then. So what's the biblical term? As a national sin, we're not going to get away with it. It's just not going to happen. Thomas Jefferson, the same thing. He was right there at the founding of America. He said, and I wish I could get the quote right, but he talks about how he says, when I think about the fact that God is just, I shudder to think about what might be in store for us. He's writing that as at the beginning of America, as America is coming in.
That's crazy, yeah.
So you have different inklings coming up in different people's writings that, you know what, this sin is real. And we're going to have to pay for it. And so with that being said, I don't think that it's coincidental or insignificant that by far, the bloodiest war that America has been on American soil as we know in the South. You know what I'm saying? But with that being said, so that's my perspective. I think that the moral law, actually I took it down now. When we talk about the moral law, it's kind of like the laws of nature. You know what I'm saying? Remember I talked about earlier with gravity, if I jump off a building, I'm going to fall. Right. The moral law is like that. I mean, it's every bit as real. And when you live in such a way that you buck on that moral law, you're gonna bump into it eventually. You know what I'm saying? One way or the other. And I think that, from my perspective, I think the Civil War would be an example of this. So that's one part. The second part would be, it is true that we reap what we sow. Very true. The question is when. There are some people who do not reap the entirety of their judgment in this life. That's true. That's true. There are slave masters who live their whole life and they just did it big as slave masters. They did everything. And then they died wealthy. And some of their wealth is still circulating in our system today. Right? It's gone out of the children, so on and so forth. Now, what's interesting is this. We were talking about how every worldview has to answer this question. You know what I'm saying? Let's just talk about atheism for a second. Alright? This I don't know my handwriting's terrible. So atheism and Christianity. If atheism is true, right, there is no God, then those slave masters who accrued wealth, did all that kind of stuff, they got off scot-free. They're gone. They look just literally gone. There is no justice to be gained, or applied to them, right? On the other hand, if there is a God, you're saying, as Christianity would suggest, then nobody gets away with anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody gets away with it. There's only one way that you get away with it, and that's through the shed blood of Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now that gets to another issue, you know what I'm saying, which maybe we'll tackle next time. But the whole point is this. Under atheism, there is no hope for justice.
Right.
Eternal justice. At least in some cases. Saying under Christianity, you do have a God who sits above it all. And one way or the other, nobody escapes the moral law. Of their own ability.
I think that works for blessings as well too.
Sure.
So when Jesus promised, or when God promised the Israelites to get out, and they were traveling through the 40 years, and I thought 40 nights.
Yeah, right.
the 40 years, they didn't see it, but their children saw it, the promised land. You know what I mean? So I think that applies. That same logic can apply with blessings as well as people getting justice and things like that.
Right. Yeah, so that, on atheism, eternally speaking, there is no hope for justice. On Christianity, we at least have tools in place by which there can be justice. We had to have a longer conversation as to how that works out. You know what I'm saying? Between the combination of, working together between justice and mercy. You know what I'm saying? We have to talk about how that works out. But in any case, they don't have either. So.
Boom, there it is, man. So, once again, just want to appreciate you guys for riding along with me. I love y'all, man. Appreciate the emails and the feedback I've been getting on the show. Appreciate you guys sharing the show, definitely, man. And without question, if you haven't already, please subscribe to us on iTunes. Give us 5 stars. And, likes on the Facebook page. Hit me up on Twitter. It's Scott Lane 7. Promote the show. If you have anybody that you know who isn't acquainted with this kind of information that we cover here on the show, man, definitely hit them with the link. Let them check it out. And, I've been getting great feedback as to, people doing that and then seeing great results, whether it be with a family member or what have you. So, love y'all, man. And that's another episode in the books. Peace.